In the traditional spot most folks around the world regard as the location where Jesus was crucified, buried, and rose from the grave, a groundbreaking archaeological discovery seems to confirm the biblical narrative found in the Gospels. And there's no one better to bring on to discuss this amazing revelation than my friend Danny the Digger Herman. Danny, what did they find?
Wow. This is really an exciting discovery, which I must say that I noticed when they were actually picking it out from the ground, and I hesitated and said, wow, this is it. And I published it, and we spoke about this, but it's now coming out in headlines in the official media. And it's funny because we're just talking about soil, just about some ground, but it's not just any soil. It's very good brown type of soil that is used for gardening in Jerusalem and its vicinity. And this was found in the last year or two when an Italian team has been doing some really important restoration work, mostly in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Okay, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, since the 4th century, is venerated as the very place where Jesus was crucified, died, buried, and came back from the dead. And the repeated problem in all holy Christian sites in the Holy Land, did they hit the right spot? Because the events happened in the 1st century, but they started venerating them only 300 years later. And the Church of the Holy Sepulchre has quite a few arguments in favor of the tradition. The fact that the heel of the crucifixion is a natural rock. The shape of the tomb fits the time frame of Jesus. But is this it? Don't we have any more evidence? In the Gospel of John, an exclusive documentation by the Gospel of John indicates that he was also buried in a garden.
Let me read that actually. It's John 19:41. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden, a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid. John 19:41.
Which, let's admit, is a bit surprising. You know, you have cemeteries and you have gardens, and usually they're not the same place. But he says this specific tomb was within a garden. And never before, to my knowledge at least, has any research been done there uncovered any evidence of gardening. Not that there was too much research. You know, the site is so holy that doing any kind of scientific work there is highly, highly limited. I was actually super surprised that all the denominations that share and quarrel over the Holy Sepulchre agreed that this Italian team from Rome will do this restoration work. And the purpose was, to a great degree, maintenance. But they also used the opportunity to do research, to dig all the way down to bedrock. They tried to hide, you know, from the public when they were working. They put veils, but I couldn't resist the temptations, and I've been following, always peeking and checking how low they were going. And I kept noticing at some places that a lot of good brown soil that I use here at my home for gardening was coming out of the pockets beneath the floor. And I said to myself, and I shared it with friends and tourists, and I even wrote a post, hey, this is good gardening soil. It matches what the Gospel of John is telling us. This is important further evidence in support of the theory, this is the site. Okay? And then I heard a lecture of the professor that is conducting these excavations, and she spoke about, you know, all the latest finds and documentation, and they're like working very, very carefully, doing isotopic tests and with microscope analysis of some of the items. But she didn't refer to the brown soil. So I said, what, they haven't noticed this, what the meaning of this is? And finally, it's been published now. After I already posted this on my website, in the blog, and maybe on my social media, made some little clips about, it's actually now coming out in the official public media. And for one thing, I'm happy that a theory that I propose is now being confirmed by official scholarship. And also that this find is coming out and is giving further testimony that this is a place, Raj. When you go there, all the evidence are in favor that this is probably the site.
You know, it's funny because you and I were talking months ago, and you said, you know, I got this theory And so I started Googling it, and I didn't find anything about it. I'm like, you know what, Danny, we should probably maybe wait till someone publishes it. Don't sleep on Danny the Digger Herman. He knows the real stuff. And it turns out, now it's on the Times of Israel. And I think this is a hugely significant point because the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, it is just layers and layers of archaeology built on top of each other. You have Crusader archaeology, you have Constantinian archaeology, you have modern archaeology, and it's just the whole thing almost seems unrecognizable. But what's amazing about this find is it validates the Gospel's retelling of kind of intricate details of what happened here. And this, not to get into this debate, but there's maybe one other place that people say maybe was the location of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. Some people will say the Garden Tomb. I know you have opinions on it. I know most archaeologists have an opinion on it. The reason I'm getting fired up is biblical archaeology. Woo, gets me excited. I know it does for you too. But what's really interesting now is the Garden Tomb, again, not to get into which one it is, has evidence of a first century garden. But now we have also
a garden at the Holy Sepulchre. Exactly.
Yeah, physical, tangible evidence that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was in a garden. So both locations now fit the gospel narrative, which is just, whew, I get really excited about this, Danny. So what should people do with this information? I think for a lot of folks, it's okay. They found some dirt. But I also think it's important for people to understand that the Bible is accurate historically. And so I guess maybe, Danny, we can have a longer conversation at some point about this, but this is your passion, biblical archaeology. What in general are all of these findings in Israel saying about the trustworthiness of the Bible?
First of all, when you speak about what should people do with this new information, if I may do some self-promotion, come to Israel, come and see it for yourself. And I know a good tour guide, okay? Tour guiding is my bread and butter, and I'll be more than happy to show people both the Holy Sepulchre and the Garden Tomb, have a discussion of the pros and cons. I'm actually doing this to a couple this Thursday. And direct flights of United Airlines and Delta are resumed this month. So getting to the Holy Land is now easier than, much easier than the last year, let's say. And in general, the thing that for me is the magic of biblical archaeology is it comes from its name, biblical archaeology, archaeology of the Bible. On one hand, you have the scriptures, 3,000 years old, 2,000 years old, but very ancient. And can scooping through the dirt find any evidence that will validate those stories, those narratives? And the answer is again and again, yes and yes and yes. And the more you dig, the more you find. And when you do find substantial evidence that supports the narrative, that's magic. That's like sparks. I love it.
Danny the Digger Herman, I love you, my brother. God bless and toda rabah.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you too, Lito.